Hello students. Today, we will learn about a significant movement in English literature. This movement is called Romanticism in English literature. It was a time when writers and poets changed the way they wrote. They began to focus more on emotions, nature, and imagination. What is Romanticism? Let us start with the word Romanticism. It comes from the word romance, but it does not just mean love stories. In English literature, Romanticism is a movement about a way of writing. It began in the late 18th century, around the 1790s, and lasted into the 19th century. Writers in this movement cared a lot about feelings, creativity, and nature. They do not want just to follow the rules or focus on logic. Instead, they wanted to express their inner thoughts and feelings. Before Romanticism, there was a period called the Age of Enlightenment. During that time, people focused a lot on reason and science. They wanted everything to make sense and be logical. However, Romantic writers thought differently. They believed that emotions and imagination were just as important as reason. Characteristics of Romanticism. Romantic writers were very different from the writers before them. Let us look at some of the main characteristics of Romanticism in English literature. Emotions and feelings. The first thing Romantic writers focused on was emotions. They believed that feelings were fundamental. Whether someone was happy, sad, angry, or excited, these emotions were worth writing about. Before Romanticism, writers did not often talk about their personal feelings in their work. However, Romantic writers wanted to share their emotions with the readers. Nature. Another big part of the Romanticism movement in English literature was nature. Romantic poets loved to write about trees, rivers, mountains, and animals. They saw nature as something pure and beautiful. Nature was not just a background for their stories or poems, it was a source of inspiration. Romantic writers believed that nature could teach us things about life. For them, walking in the woods or climbing a mountain was not just fun. It was a way to think deeply about life and the world. Imagination. The next important part of Romanticism is imagination. Romantic writers thought imagination was more important than logic. They wanted to create new worlds, ideas, and ways of thinking. They often wrote about things that were not real, like ghosts, fairies, or magical places. Imagination allowed them to explore their dreams and create stories that were full of wonder and mystery. Individualism. Romantic writers believed in the power of the individual. This means they thought every person was unique and had their own particular way of seeing the world. They did not want to just follow the rules of society. Instead, they wanted to write about their personal experiences and thoughts. Romantic writers were often rebels. They wanted to express their ideas without caring about others' thoughts. The past. Romanticism in English literature focused on the past. Romantic writers often looked back at the Middle Ages, a time long ago when there were knights, castles, and great battles. They believed this period had a sense of magic and mystery missing from the modern world. Romantic writers and poets. Let us discuss some of this time's most famous writers and poets. William Wordsworth. William Wordsworth is one of the most famous poets from the Romantic period. He loved nature and believed that it was full of wisdom. One of his most famous poems is, "I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud." In this poem, he describes walking through a field of beautiful yellow flowers called daffodils. Wordsworth felt that nature could make people feel happy and peaceful. Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Coleridge was a close friend of Wordsworth. He was also a very famous poet from the Romantic period. One of his most famous poems is The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. This poem is about a sailor on a strange and dangerous sea voyage. Coleridge used much imagination. His poems often had magical or mysterious elements. Lord Byron. Lord Byron was another influential Romantic poet. He was known for his adventurous life and his powerful poetry. One of his famous works is Childe Harold's Pilgrimage. Byron often wrote about heroes who did not fit in with society. These characters were usually full of deep emotions and were frequently rebels. Percy Bysshe Shelley. Shelley was another Romantic poet who believed in the power of imagination. He often wrote about freedom and the importance of thinking for yourself. One of his famous poems is Ode to the West Wind. In this poem, Shelley uses the wind as a symbol of change and new ideas. John Keats. John Keats is one of the most beloved Romantic poets. Even though he died very young, he wrote some of the most beautiful poetry in English literature. One of his famous poems is Ode to a Nightingale. In this poem, Keats writes about listening to a bird singing and thinking about the beauty and sadness of life. Themes in Romantic literature. Let us look at the themes that promote Romanticism in English literature. Love and passion. Many Romantic writers wrote about love, but it was not always the kind of love we see in movies. Romantic love in literature was often passionate and intense. It was sometimes happy, but it could also be full of sadness. Romantic writers wanted to show how love can be complicated and powerful. The supernatural. Romantic writers were also very interested in the supernatural. This means they wrote about things that could not be explained by science. Ghosts, spirits, and magical events often appeared in their stories and poems. They believed there was more to the world than we can see. Solitude and isolation. Many Romantic characters were often alone. Being alone or in solitude was essential because it gave them time to think deeply about their feelings and life. Writers usually show their characters walking through the countryside alone with their thoughts. This was a way for them to connect with nature and their emotions. Rebellion. Romantic writers did not like following rules. They often wrote about characters who were rebels. These characters did not want to live by the laws of society. Instead, they tried to follow their hearts and do what they felt was right. Beauty of nature. Nature was vital to Romantic writers. They saw beauty in mountains, rivers, forests, and even the smallest flowers. For them, nature was not just a place to visit. It was a source of inspiration, peace, and wisdom. How Romanticism changed English literature. Before Romanticism, writers focused more on reason, order, and rules. Romanticism changed that and made literature more emotional, imaginative, and personal. Writers started to care more about their inner feelings and the beauty of the natural world. Conclusion. To sum up, Romanticism was an exceptional time in English literature. It was a time when writers cared more about emotions, nature, and imagination. Some of the greatest writers and poets in history were part of this movement, and their works are still loved today. Thank you for watching. I hope you now have a better understanding of Romanticism in English literature.